Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits, and I've been wondering what would happen if you had a musical theatre mashup with other works of art. We might get In the Wuthering Heights, presumably starring actors like Bronte Barbe, who, as you'll know from Musical Talk, has appeared in Newsies and Kathy and Stella Solve a Murder, amongst others. Well, this is episode 915 of Musical Talk, and we're gathering speed towards our 20th year of broadcasting, because it was in September 2006 that Musical Talk first started. And as you know from previous episodes, we are now Britain's longest-running show business podcast, and we also think the United Kingdom's oldest independent podcast. But this episode finds us at the end of January 2026, and it was only a month ago many of us were singing Auld Lang Syne. Should old acquaintance be forgot? Well, the answer, of course, is no, certainly not. And this episode is going to be the proof of that statement, because it's my great delight to say that we're going to be able to catch up with David Kingsmill, an old friend of this programme over many, many years, and now a resident of Canada. Now, Canada is a great independent nation with a strong and vibrant culture. And I think it's fair to say that Come From Away, which is probably the most famous Canadian musical, has really helped put Canada on the musical theatre map globally. But the world of musical theatre in Canada isn't just resting on one show. Oh, goodness me, no. Canada has become, in recent years, much more visibly one of the great creators of musical theatre. And just a very quick glance online will show you that. But how much better to hear it from the horse's mouth? And that's what we're going to do today, because David is a composer in his own right, but he's also immersed in the world of theatre and musical theatre in Canada. So, in a way, this episode is from our Canadian correspondent, David Kingsmill. He was in Edinburgh at the 2025 Edinburgh Festival Fringe, and he and I like to catch up whenever we're in the same country, which is not as often as it might be. But last year it was. We sat down in front of a microphone quite early one morning, actually, in a cafe in one of the theatrical venues where you could have seen shows, and it was still setting up. So you may hear some clunks and bangs in the background, but it all gives you a sense of what it was like to be in Edinburgh last year. And in this wonderful conversation, we're going to be talking about a whole host of shows which are famous internationally and also which have been in or were created in Canada. So, in this conversation today, you're going to hear views about Something Rotten, Hades Town, Life After, The Louder They Get, Grow, Emilio's A Million Chameleons, Confessions of a Red-Headed Coffee Shop Girl, and also we'll be touching on other musicals as well, such as Baker Street, Iron Albert and Newsies. It's a real hodgepodge and tapestry of musical theatre knowledge, and I hope you'll find it as fascinating as I did. So, let's cut to the chase. Here's my conversation with the wonderful David Kingsmill about the world of musical theatre in and from Canada. Musical Talk. Well, David, I can't tell you what pleasure it is to see you again. I only get to see you at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe these days, as you are a resident of Canada now.
Yes.
But that makes seeing you all the more sweet.
Oh, likewise.
So, as always, it's just lovely to sit down and have a chat with you and talk about anything musically theatre-minded or things with songs which sort of caught your fancy. But I think we do need to talk about why you're here at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe in 2025, because you're back with the wonderful Rebecca Perry, with a show which has been played here and indeed everywhere all over the world. I mean, this is a properly global show.
It is, yeah.
And it's called Confessions of a Red-Headed Coffee Shop Girl.
Correct.
Which is actually quite consonant bass, I noticed.
Yes.
Consonant bass, I should say. Quite tricky to say, but
Also
delightful
long,
to watch.
when you have 40 words for the Edinburgh Fringe programme and the title is included.
It's like a return to the old Twitter limits.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So for people who don't know the show, or perhaps don't really identify who Rebecca is, just give us a quick rundown of what that is and how this show is doing in 2025.
Certainly. So for longer listeners may remember back in 2019...
You mean people over 6 foot?
Yes. But may remember back in 2019, you actually interviewed Rebecca.
I did.
She was here with From Judy to Betty, the stars of Old Hollywood.
Which was a marvellous show. She's very talented.
She is. Yeah. And yes, that was the last time either of us was here with a performance.
Well, things happened a few years after that.
Things did happen a few years after that. Yes, a 3.5-month tour that I managed to book off the basis of that went up in smoke, which was a shame.
Although you did do some, by the way, I should just say you did some rather marvellous stuff online.
Yes.
Because I know that the Judy show was, is that right?
It actually went on as a streaming...
I'm sure I saw it streaming,
like 2 months in, I think it was May. No, hang on a minute. No, it wasn't. It was March.
So
it was really, really quick, because I'd been looking into streaming anyway as doing board games and stuff online, and so I had an idea of how to do it. And so we jumped on it really fast. And interestingly, we did do a show in May. We did a folk show, and the audience numbers were about 20% of what we had in, because I think people had already had their fill.
I see, yes.
And so we were lucky to jump on the bandwagon that quickly, actually.
And I saw the enormous clock in your living room.
Yes, it's a wonderful clock. But yes, anyway, to get our listeners back on track. So she was there then, but she had been here in 2015 and 2016 with Confessions of a Red-Headed Coffee Shop Girl and Adventures of a Red-Headed Coffee Shop Girl, which is the sequel, although actually now in true fashion of The Lion King, the third show has been written and fits in between the two. Which is Christmas with a Red-Headed Coffee Shop Girl.
So it's a prequel and a sequel.
It's a prequel and a sequel.
Which would be a sprequel.
Sure.
Don't think that's going to catch on.
No, neither do I.
You heard it here first, but you also heard it here last.
But Confessions sold out back in 2015. It was at the Gilder Balloon Teviot, and it's back for its 10th anniversary. Hurrah.
Yeah.
And doing very well right now at the Patter House, which is where From Judy to Betty was back in 2019. And the show is about a character called Joni Little, who is an anthropology graduate who can't get a job in her field and so ends up working as a barista.
If I may say, this is unfortunately a millennial problem, isn't it?
Well, and
so many
is the
people in
thing.
this case, or a variant on it.
Very much so. And one of the things we've been actually discovering as we do the show more and more in recent years is the way that the culture has changed. And Gen Z is much more about, well, okay, I can't do this, so I'll do that. And it's that they embrace it in a way that millennials didn't so much.
More adaptable, but only because the circumstances are so terrible, there's no alternative, presumably.
Sadly, I think that is correct. But Joni is obsessed with Jane Goodall, and so becomes the Jane Goodall, or the David Attenborough, if you will, of the coffee shop, and starts basically analysing all of the customers as if they were animals in the jungle. So the businessman in a suit becomes a rather to-the-point penguin, or the ex-boyfriend, not to spoil a gag, but is compared at one point to a peacock.
Yes.
And so it's this logic of seeing the coffee shop culture through a different lens, and it's really, really good fun. It's a play with songs, or she calls it a showsicle, in the sense that it does have quite a lot of music. It's more musically weighted towards the second half, so if anyone comes in expecting music off the bat, I don't think you get a full song for about 25 minutes, but then they rattle off fairly rapidly.
As the setup is created.
Exactly. Yes. There's a lot of characters to meet, all of them pay off by the end of the show as well. But it's absolutely charming. I actually got to know Rebecca originally because she was coming in 2015, and I'd just done my shows in 2014, and a friend of ours threw us together in a cafe and said, hey, talk. You know,
a coffee shop, in fact.
A coffee shop, indeed. But it's an absolutely wonderful show that has stood the test of time really well. I think it's been updated. It just ran at the Toronto Fringe and sold out, which was delightful. But it had some new scenes written, and
there's always new archetypes, aren't there?
Exactly, exactly.
You've just got to find the animal that works with them.
Precisely. And so that was something that was really worth doing, because I think it revitalised the show a little bit. Not that it needed it, but
refreshed.
It brought it into a greater appreciation for the contemporary audience. They already enjoyed it, but now there's a couple of bits that feel a little bit more relevant to them, I think.
You mentioned The Lion King just a minute ago. It's quite interesting because this appears to be doing the opposite thing to that, which is that animals are being turned into humans, at least in performance terms.
That's true, actually.
And are given human personalities, as they work their way through Hamlet. And this is doing the reverse of that in the sense which is actually that people are being given so it's not anthropomorphism, it's the reverse of that, and I don't know what the term for that would be. And yet,
that's a really good
at the same time, it is through the anthropomorphism or the anti-anthropomorphism that's going on, where the people are then compared to animals, you are actually getting an insight into their personalities.
Very much so.
Oddly, it is also a psychological treatise that's
Yeah.
being dressed up. There's a layer upon a layer there already, and just a description of it. And then you said songs, and I thought, well, I'm in. So...
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true, and there's no greater example of that in the show, I think, and this doesn't give anything away because he's identified 5 minutes in, but the boss of the cafe is compared to a gorilla.
And I therefore immediately have a sense of what that character
exactly.
is like. It's odd how that works.
His introduction line, again, not to give anything away, but it's, my boss Gabe is standing by the door, lumbering really, like a great silverback ape, and immediately you know who this character is. And even, you don't imagine... sure, you might imagine a gorilla because we're telling you to imagine a gorilla, but you also can see the person so clearly. Everybody knows that sort of superior grumpy boss type character, and it's not hard to see them in that description, and I think that's one of the things that this show does so well.
Sagging alpha male.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it takes no effort to understand who these characters are because they've already been characterized.
But isn't that interesting? Because I think it also, just at a wider level, I think it also raises a question about why do we associate personalities with animals? I suspect it's something that's gone back through centuries and probably millennia.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Where we have anthropomorphized animals to give them to give them stereotypes.
Yes.
Forgive me, that's an enormous question which I shall have to chew on later. What the songs are self-written?
No. No, the songs are all covers for this one.
Oh, fine, right.
Yeah, which is a difference from...
So it's a jukebox in a way.
Yeah, it is a jukebox of sorts, but it's not a jukebox of any particular individual. It's rather a jukebox of what you would hear playing in a coffee shop in the early 2010s, which is when the show is set.
Yeah.
And it establishes itself very quickly, because Rebecca wrote this in 2012, 2013, premiered it in 2013. Well, it had its first show in 2013, kind of premiered it full scale in 2015, and the show is set in 2014. And it makes it very
still set in
clear.
clear.
It's still set. We added a whole section at the beginning of the show specifically to enable that.
To tie it into that peer of the audience.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so all the music, when she was picking the music for the show, her concern was wanting to do some Canadian songs, wanting to do also some Canadian covers of songs, and then her own versions of those. But also, what would I have heard on the radio because this was all based on her experience working. There's a section in Toronto called the Annex, which is quite trendy. She compares it to Shoreditch in London, for those who know it.
Yeah, Hoxton, yes, I know.
And she worked in a coffee shop there, and she's told this story many times, but she would write down on the back of a piece of till paper entertaining interactions that she had while she was there, and eventually realised there was a show here. So that's where the show came from, which meant the music came from the same place. It came from what she heard while she was working in that coffee shop in 2012, 2013.
Oddly, at a corporate level, bearing in mind she was working for a company, she was doing what a lot of composers and authors do anyway, which is have mood tapes. It just happens that the mood tape was what was on in the background on the radio or whatever was playing on the system in that shop.
Yeah, that's
really interesting to me, because the more, funnily enough, mood tapes or mood, tapes is an old-fashioned term, obviously, but but you know what I mean. Having a
mood
selection,
downloads.
Yeah. It doesn't sound as good, though.
No.
But having mood music of some variety, or things to get you in the rhythm and feel of these things, is genuinely. It seems a very modern way of composing.
Yeah.
I don't remember people talking about that when musical talk first started 20 years ago, even.
No, I can imagine.
A lot more common. I was interviewing a very lovely man called Zach Burns only recently. He's writing a musical about the birth of the National Health Service.
Oh, interesting.
But he was being very honest about how the way he and his fellow creators work on it, which is that they've got someone who can piece together their fragments that they thought up into songs more cohesively. But he asked them for their mood music that they were using when they were coming up for it, so he could get into their zone or their vibes.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is an interesting way of creating, I think, which it seems odd. I'm not a creator of that style, but it's interesting that is very common, and inadvertently almost, that is how Rebecca came up with the show.
Yeah, very much so.
And it's important, isn't it, I think, to recognise the fact that it is a Canadian cultural artefact.
Yes.
You've mentioned that several times, and I think that needs to be stressed.
Yeah, and there are people...
And which I just want to briefly say, sorry,
please,
Canada has, I mean, it always has had, but it has a much higher international musical theatre profile because of Come From Away, which you spoke about so very eloquently last time. We had a nice chat, which was probably 2019.
Yes, indeed.
But, it's nice to know there's a broadening Canadian tradition to rival the European tradition, the London tradition, and of course the Bear Moth, the Broadway tradition.
Absolutely, no, and I think there's a lot of great content coming out of Canada right now. But this is definably, it's set in Toronto. Yeah. There are street names given that we actually had somebody come up...
Which are Torontonian?
And we actually had somebody come up and say, I know exactly where you're talking about. I used to live here. And it would have been a street that Joni walks down in the middle of the show. And so it's been delightful having that connection. We also, actually, extraordinarily at the Toronto Fringe, we had somebody come up to us after the show who actually works with Jane Goodall.
Oh, no. Amazing.
And absolutely loved it. And that was very gratifying as well. I mean, Rebecca has actually met Dr. Goodall herself. We went to
after she'd written the show.
After she'd written the show. This would have been about probably 2017, 2018. She came and spoke at the Sony Centre in Toronto, and we went to go and see her and actually hung around afterwards, and Rebecca told her about the show, and she was very encouraging of it, and sort of, it sort of ties in with the evangelism work that she does of environmentalism, and so it was really actually very, very delightful exchange.
I want to reiterate the point you made just for British listeners, that this is the equivalent of Sir David Attenborough.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But exactly the same kind.
Although I think her profile maybe actually be growing more recently, I think, but Dr. Goodall, best known for her work with chimpanzees, she actually started the practice of naming chimpanzees in the wild as she was studying them, which is standard nowadays.
How interesting!
And she was very, very much an up and comer. If I remember her story, and I don't know it as well as Rebecca does, but if I remember her story correctly, she signed on, I think, to be a secretary, and ended up becoming an observer herself, and has turned into one of the titans of primatology and zoology in general, I think. And it's what an amazing track for somebody to have. This show is not a biopic.
Can I just say, sorry, oddly, we were talking about this before we went on to the recording, but that is the plot of La Serva Padrona, the mistress.
Actually, that's very true.
The mistress, the secretary term mistress kind of thing, or the servant term mistress.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
but no, I mean, it's an incredible path that she took, and as Rebecca says in the show, she started all of this from the treehouse in her backyard, and it's developed into
a lifelong passion.
Yeah, 100%, and that's a wonderful thing. This is, as I say, it's no way is a biopic, but there is a little bit of information about Dr. Goodall passed on.
She's a flavour.
Correct.
Correct. She's a syrup in someone's coffee.
Yes. But you also asked how it's doing, and I mean, obviously, as I say, it's sold out Toronto Fringe, which was delightful. We're in the Doonstairs venue at the Patter House here, so it's a 160-seater, so we haven't sold out yet, but our audiences are increasing, and we're getting very good audience response from it. We've already had a couple of delightful reviews on the Fringe website, which is lovely. And that's I think the greatest thing about this show is just how thoroughly broad the demographic appeal is. There was a review back in the day that said it's suitable for ages 9 to 99.
What did the 18-year-olds and the 100-year-olds do to deserve the exclusion, I wonder?
But I think it's absolutely true. It's something that you don't have to... You can just enjoy it on the base level of the fun, or you can dig into the story that's there, which, it's not Tolstoy, but at the same time, there is a solid story that runs through it all, and there's a couple of progressive arcs, and then there's the sort of bookend payoffs, and there's lots of little bits, levels in which you can dig into it. And I think it's fantastic, because it means you really go into it, you just come out smiling. I do, and I've
You've seen it
worked
a few
on this
times,
show more times than I can count at this point.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's also, in a way, it's an encapsulation of what it is to be in a coffee shop as a customer. Because people use coffee shops for very different things. Some people just sit there to have a cup of coffee and let their mind just go off. They daydream and fall asleep almost. There are people who are feverishly working in the corner in different ways. There are people who are there to socialise. There are people who make friends with the staff.
Yep.
And that's just 4 off the top of my head. And that's just archetypes I can think of. If you can then do this marvellous thing of then sort of transposing them into a different form of life, you can then carry on that forensic interaction and a forensic analysis of what they do and their interactions through being turned into animals. It sounds very interesting, and I like it. And I like the levels of it as well.
And every one of those types you just mentioned comes up in the show.
Do they? Fine. Well,
yeah.
Oh, yes. I wasn't suggesting anything was original there, but
no. But it's
as someone who goes to cafes.
But I think that's the point. Is it shows exactly how relatable it is. The fact that you just came up with a bunch of examples and all of them are in there. And it's I think actually, funnily enough, from an interest perspective, nothing to do with the show at all, but if I can recommend to listeners, if anyone's interested in this kind of thought process, there's a really wonderful book by a guy called, I think it's Tom Standage, called A History of the World in 6 Glasses.
That sounds interesting.
He talks about the sort of cultural, economic, political history of the world through the lens of beer, wine, spirits, coffee, tea, and Coca-Cola. And it's really, really interesting, and you realise how old coffee culture truly is, and how baked into human history and human development.
It's much older than its often told story of its introduction into Europe, because obviously it goes back thousands of years with indigenous populations, isn't it?
Absolutely, and this logic too of it's always been somewhere for people to gather and have ideas, and
as was chocolate, I gather. Is that correct?
Oh, possibly. That one I don't know about.
Yes. As in drinking chocolate, which is its original form, essentially.
I couldn't say on that one. I don't know, but coffee been around forever, been a gathering point forever, and that's really what this show kind of celebrates, I guess, is the value of a coffee shop as a gathering point, is a feature of it, which makes sense, I think, given where it came from.
It's a nexus point for human interaction.
It is.
Yeah, exactly. And still is, as I say, a cafe today is as much that as it ever has been.
Witness the coffee on the table I'm drinking right now.
But David, obviously that's a show that's live for you, but I know that as always you've got your finger in a lot of creative pies, not just theatre based actually.
True.
But for musical talk, I think there's a few shows that you've got a few words to say about.
Definitely. Although ironically I think I have seen a smaller frequency of musicals compared to what I used to, just because work and life and all that kind of thing.
And your horizons have expanded, yes.
It's true. But yes, I have seen a few very, very solid ones. I wrote down a short list of things I'd seen, and I think possibly one of the best I've ever seen has to top that list, which is Something Rotten.
Now, Something Rotten. I know one thing about this. I could be wrong, but I think one of the co-authors of that is the man who wrote the best-selling book Things Can Only Get Better in 1997.
Oh, possible, I don't know.
John somebody?
I couldn't tell you.
I think he took, because he's written the subsequent memoir. Mm-hmm. He's a very funny writer, and he's written a subsequent memoir, and I think somehow he's got involved in that.
Right.
And it is tell us more.
It's possible.
Because it's not made it to Britain, I don't think.
No, not as of yet. And it was on Broadway. I saw it in Stratford, Ontario. For those listeners who aren't aware, place names in Canada, which is true in the USA as well, are often taken from British names.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Obviously, people went over there and wanted that little bit of home. New York being the most obvious example.
Yeah. And so unlike York.
Yes, quite. But hilariously, actually, there's an Instagram reel that goes around every now and then saying if you're a Canadian and you can't afford to visit Europe, and it just shows a 3.5-hour driving tour, which will drive you through about, I think it's 9 or 10 towns that have major European city names.
Excellent. Yes.
London is about 2.5 hours outside Toronto.
Is it now?
No, maybe not even that. 2 hours.
It's a home.
But Stratford has very much been modelled on Stratford-upon-Avon.
Oh, it has.
It's one of the two big non-Toronto theatre destinations. There's Niagara-on-the-Lake, which is where the Shaw Festival happens, and there's Stratford.
As in George Bernard Shaw.
Yes. And there's a few theatres there, and then there's Stratford, Ontario, and there's a few theatres there. Stratford, built on a river, there are swans. There's a lot of parallels. It's quite funny, actually. But there's some remarkable
buildings, but with double glazing.
Quite so. And they do 8, 10, 12 shows a year. I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but a couple of them are usually musicals. And in recent years, I've seen. Actually, I saw La Cage aux Folles there. That was very, very good.
Yes.
Didn't quite live up to Philip Quast and Roger Allam when I saw them.
Who I interviewed for Musical Talk.
I
was very delighted to get a slice of their time. They were lovely.
Oh, yeah.
I should just briefly say that Roger Allam showed me how to do the bevel, which doesn't make terribly good radio, but it was to be told by Roger Allam, who's one of the great British actors.
Oh, absolutely.
How to stand, and the bevel, if you like, is where one leg is straight and the other leg is slightly bent.
Yes.
It's a kind of sort of it's a terrible thing to say. It's associated with a feminine pose.
Yes, it is.
A demure feminine pose.
It is, but I love the fact that you got that from Roger. That's fabulous. Yes. Absolutely fabulous. But yeah, so it didn't quite stand up to their vote, although to be fair, I'm biased towards them anyway. But it was still wonderful. But Something Rotten, categorically, I think one of the best things I've seen. And it tells the story of this young man who's desperate to be a playwright, and he keeps getting overshadowed by the cad that is William Shakespeare. And so he pays a soothsayer to figure out what Shakespeare's next big thing is going to be, and doesn't... Of course, nobody knows who Hamlet is, and so he misinterprets it as omelette, and goes to write the great musical, because musicals are going to be the big thing, Omelette. And I won't say any more. I've probably given too much away already, but
I think the tonal thing here is silly, isn't it?
The tonal thing here is absolutely ridiculous, in the best possible way, and
Python-esque almost.
Yeah. Actually, I think that's reasonable, but I came out of that show hurting from having laughed so much, and my cheeks were aching. It's like, it was one of those, I don't think I have laughed that much in years, and it's absolute silliness, but it's absolutely delightful. And you could go in and look at it and just almost see it as not taking itself seriously enough. I would disagree with that. I think it takes itself exactly as seriously as it needs to, and is remarkable because of it. The songs are so on point. There's a variety of musical, like William Shakespeare's a rock star,
yes.
Full on, and then you get traditional musical theatre. You get it's got a little bit of everything in it, and is just it's one of those things that was pure joy on paper, and translates even more so to the stage. And I cannot recommend, if you get the opportunity to see it anywhere, even just listen to the cast recording. And it's quite marvellous.
And can I ask, because it's called Something Rotten, and that could either, obviously, that's an egg-related thing, clearly. It is also relates to a character's motivations.
Indeed.
And presumably, because it sounds like it's essentially a Tudor story,
yeah.
The living conditions of people.
Yes, very much so. And actually, the main characters begin in a state of, abject poverty, trying to make everything work out for themselves, and that goes places as well. And of course, also a reference to Something Rotten in the state of Denmark.
Oh, of course, I was missing the absolutely. I was too busy.
I watched you digging into it there, and I was like, and there's that one too.
No, yours is obviously the correct one.
But they're all correct. Yeah. That's the thing.
Yeah. But there's also a nice little sideline here, and this is just a tangential thing. But the late Charles Strouse wrote the theme tune to an American comedy, a television comedy, which I think was a Mel Brooks comedy, called When Things Were Rotten, which, as far as I can gather, was a kind of Robin Hood period spoof.
I don't know it.
About the corruption of medieval, in this case Britain, but any medieval state. But the theme tune was written by Charles Strouse, the late Charles Strouse, I should say, the late great Charles Strouse, I should probably say. Have a great deal of affection for Charles and his work, but the theme tune wasn't just written for When Things Were Rotten, so I'm getting that kind of vibe about, there's fun to be had with finding what was horrible and making fun of it.
Yes.
But also, the song, as it happens, was a lift by Charles from a failed musical that he wrote in London in the 1970s called I and Albert. Which was about
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's actually some of it lives on in some kind of memory.
Yeah.
It's about Queen Victoria and Prince Albert and the Victorian era. And there's a song I love it actually. It's a very good score. There's a song called His Royal Highness, where the Prime Minister Palmerston is he was a gunboat diplomatist, if you understand the phraseology. So he's a quite gung-ho kind of character.
Yes.
Basically really detests Prince Albert's interference in what he thinks of as his job as Prime Minister.
Right.
And obviously, and let's not get into the constitutional issues of that, but anyway, it's a great song. It's a great song, His Royal Highness. It's got an element of papa as well, to get that German flavour from Prince Albert. Anyway, it's a very lovely song. The score is excellent. But one of the songs was reused melodically to be the theme tune to When Things Were Rotten, the Mel Brooks comedy, which sounds like it's not a million miles away from Something Rotten. And there we are. That's the end of my excursion into Charles Strouse.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, that's actually really interesting, and I'm going to have to do some digging into that myself, because that sounds quite extraordinary.
Iron Albert is a score worth visiting, actually.
Yeah,
it really
I'll give it a I'll check it out. There's so many of those, the disappeared scores that... a personal favourite of mine is Baker Street. I don't know if you know Baker Street.
There's two Sherlock Holmes musicals. Is Baker Street the one where there's a marvellous song where he's the man has arrived with his mystery, but before he's even started talking, Holmes has worked out that he's got a bit of clay on his slipper. And
yes.
that clay is only found where they're digging up the ground on the corner by the post office in Wigmore Street.
Yes,
is that correct?
correct?
Bloody hell, I've dredged that from quite a long way down.
That was impressive, actually.
A great musical.
It is a great musical. It's also got I'm a big fan of scansion of difficult things and rhyming of difficult things, and it's the musical that manages to rhyme and scan the phrase London Metropolitan Police.
Oh, fabulous.
And I think that if
we
I
were talking
remember
about
correctly...
consonants at the beginning, weren't we?
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I think the line, if I recall correctly, is, who are you going to trust to help you keep the peace? Surely not the London Metropolitan Police. And I was like, that is
it bloody well works.
So good.
It's that bounce, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, how on earth does that work? Who on earth came up with that? And you assume they sat there and okay, well, London Metropolitan Police, how do we make that work? But it's just, it's so effortless, and it's the song with the Baker Street Irregulars. Yeah. So absolutely beautiful. But yes, that's a favourite of mine. But coming back to more recency for me, Hades Town.
Oh, well, which is in London.
Yeah. Now, I saw this in Toronto, but my goodness, what a show. Yeah. Absolutely phenomenal. As somebody who has been working an awful lot on his bass range of his voice, listening to Hades sing at any given point, we had a very good Hades, and my word, what a wonderful role for somebody with a deep voice. But
a Russian bass.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's such a powerful piece, and I love that it's kind of got a little bit more of the folk tradition to it, but in something that is still definably contemporary musical theatre.
Well, it's interesting you say folk, and I'm going to make a distinction here which probably oughtn't to be made, but a friend of mine whose views I very firmly respect, Josh Clark, who's a friend of Musical Talk, when he saw it, he thought it followed the country tradition, which of course is American folk.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think you could argue it. But no, you know what? I can see that too. I think I'm almost thinking from the British perspective, but also I think there's an instrumental leaning towards some folk at some point and some country at other points. And I think I know more about folk, but
it's a blurred.
It is, and that's the whole point, I think, of that show. Is it's a mash of many musical styles.
A mash of many musical styles. What a lovely phrase that was.
But it comes together so beautifully, and of course, leaning into the story of Persephone and Greek myth and all that sort of thing. But just a joy on stage for a different reason.
Yeah.
Like you don't come out of it with a sense of the ridiculous. You come out of it with a sense of this, a sort of sense of profundity, but also this very deep story that comes out of myth, and yet is somehow very relatable. Mixed in with the vibe of the show itself has that kind of saloon quality feel, the way it's lit, the way the choice of the pieces that are used in the set. It's got that vibe of kind of like I think that's there's definitely a country aesthetic to the visual, to this kind of modern saloon bar look. The lighting is very, for want of a better phrase, very analog. It doesn't give you they physically have lights that hang down that become part of the choreography elements of it and things like that.
This is such a stupid tangent, but they do the same thing in Newsies. Newsies was on in London.
I never saw Newsies.
It's actually it has weaknesses, but it's a very jolly musical. But there's a lovely sequence where all the poor kids, they're in a cafe drinking water because it's free, and the very obvious lamps come down to give you the sense of a cafe, and then they do this amazing choreography where they're all swinging from the lamps like pendulums. It's actually hair-raising to watch as well as highly enjoyable. I mean, it's very different from what you're talking about, but you just said using lamps in choreography. There are two different ways of doing it. There's the Hades Town way, and then there's the Newsies way, and all human life lies in between, I think.
I love that. But it's very, very compelling, and it's one of those things that you just can't take your eyes off it once you start watching. I was absolutely enraptured by that show, and it's entered my frequent listening.
Oh, has it? Right,
as a
okay.
result, yeah. I think
it's dark, though, isn't it?
It is dark.
Yeah. But you made a really profound point, I think, actually, there, that, that it's obviously based on classics. And sometimes it's easy to just see those classics as being caught in aspic, as being something from the past, something to admire or respect, but don't necessarily have a relevance or a resonance with modern day living. And yet it doesn't take much to polish them up and show that they are still talking about truth and archetypes and humanity.
Yep.
Even if there are gods wandering all around it or whatever. And,
absolutely.
It's I do think the reason they're still remembered, these stories, is because they are still relevant.
Definitely.
And here we are, a lovely new polished up version of a classical story.
Yeah, and it works incredibly. I mean, not that I saw this, but I guess I can speak tangentially to it. Mythic.
Oh, I don't know that.
Which was on at the Charing Cross Theatre some time ago. It actually came over.
This is Charing Cross, London.
This is Charing Cross, yes. I don't think we've got a Charing Cross, but it came over.
Oh, you will.
It came over.
There's a Charing Cross in Norwich, so.
Oh, is there?
Yeah,
okay,
so
then
there's bound to be one.
Yeah, give it time. But it came over to the Seagull Centre in Montreal. I didn't unfortunately manage to get up to see it, which I was disappointed with. But that is like a rock musical, again, looking at Persephone just from a very different angle. Absolutely wonderful cast recording. I have not seen the show, so I can't speak to that. But again, contemporary retelling of a mythical story, but in a very, very, very excellent musical way. And I assume that the stage show supports that.
But, we all know that My Fair Lady is based, not that that's a new show, but My Fair Lady is based on Pygmalion, and Pygmalion, the George Bernard Shaw play, is based on the classical myth. W.S. Gilbert also had a crack at Pygmalion.
Right.
And his was the Pygmalion until George Bernard Shaw wrote his.
I always forget about that. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, so it's definitely, stories don't die.
No, they don't. That's
it's
a
just
really interesting point, actually, yes.
Yeah, it's whether you can tell them in a way that is compelling to a contemporary audience. If you sit here, even people struggle to read the Silmarillion, and that was written, what? I don't know, 80 years ago, 50s? Yeah, something like that. And it's hard work because it is the mythology for a fictional world. So you're fighting two things there. You've got mythology and you've got a huge number of names and we don't have any relation to it. It's not like King Arthur where it's like, okay, yeah, sure. One, Arthur is a known name. Two, King Arthur is a relatively known quantity. You can figure that one out. Silmarillion's a whole different kettle of fish, but people still struggle with it. So how do you deal with something that was written 2,000 years ago?
Quite, yeah. Really good point. Yeah.
So I think but stories don't die. If you can find the right way to retell them, they're right back with us again. So yeah, that was an interesting one. Another show I really, really enjoyed was a very recent. It was written, I don't know exactly when, but in the last decade, was a show called Life After.
Ooh, haven't heard of that.
And this is Toronto specific. It's by Britta Johnson, who's a very very talented and successful Toronto composer and writer. And the show, it's a fascinating story actually. It looks at a young girl whose father was supposed to be flying to a meeting, and she looks into his life a little bit and realizes that he made a phone call after the flight was supposed to have left from completely the opposite direction to where the airport was.
Oh.
And she starts getting really obsessed with this and digs into this. So for those who may get a chance to see this at some point, this could potentially be considered a spoiler, although I'd say no. And that's only the next sentence, so jump ahead 5 seconds. It's never conclusive what she actually finds out. But it doesn't matter, because it's the journey along the way, and it's really, the musical is really about the obsession of this one person being absolutely determined to uncover the story behind why he wasn't where he was supposed to be, and it's absolutely brilliantly presented. This was performed in one of the Mirvish. So Mirvish is the Mirvish theatres are the Toronto equivalent of Ambassadors or Nederlander or whoever it happens to be. The big difference in Toronto, incidentally, is there isn't really a competitor to them. There are individual theatres, and there's Soul Pepper, which is sort of a little section of 2 or 3. I think there's 2 or 3 theatres that kind of fall under that bracket that are all in one building. But it's not the same way that London and New York have 4 or 5 competing major companies.
Yes.
It's Mirvish. That's it. So if you hear a talk of the Mirvish theatres, they're kind of the big ones, and they have their 900, 1,000 seaters. That's where the
Shorthand
Lion
for
King
West
goes,
End
or the
then,
tours.
equivalent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's as much as we have of that. Anyway, it went into one of the Mervish theatres there, and it was this extraordinary production, beautiful set, one of the most incredible sets I've seen for a while. This whole house opened up, and there was the second floor was a built set above the first floor. The first floor could revolve.
Oh, right, how interesting.
And so you could see different elements. You had the outside section, and you had the indoor section, which was also where the father's study was and things like this. But it was an absolute remarkable triumph, in my view. Very, very compelling. I don't
Clearly
know.
musical.
Clearly musical. Yeah. It was musical. I believe there may be talk of a cast recording, so there may be a way to hear it in the not too distant future.
Which
I really
of course does give momentum, doesn't it?
It does, and I really hope there is, because I want to listen to it more. It was such good music. I saw it 2 days before it closed, and wish I'd seen it sooner so I could have gone back and seen it again.
So we're now living in a life after life after.
Exactly.
Yes.
But yeah, that was a great show. So that was another one that I'd seen. Then I guess the other ones that jumped to mind, there's actually friends of mine, Colleen and Akiva, who write musicals. They're a duo, actually now one in Toronto, one in Vancouver. They used to both live in Toronto, but Colleen's out in Vancouver. And I've seen a couple of their shows recently, and they actually just did a reunion concert featuring a whole bunch of music from their shows and a couple of teasers from the next show they're writing, which was very exciting.
So they're still a creative partnership.
They are. But the two shows I've seen, they've changed titles a couple of times. One is now known as The Louder They Get, and it's based on it was originally called Prom Queen, and it was based on a story. They're Toronto-based stories, and this was based on a true story of a boy back in, I want to say the 80s?
Oh, right, okay.
No, maybe not. Maybe it's the 90s. Too
Last
recent.
century.
Who wanted to take his boyfriend to prom. And the school board forbade it, and the school rallied around, and it was this big story at the time. Gentleman's name is Mark Hall, and you can look him up. But they wrote a musical based on it, which is absolutely phenomenal. Kind of just basically retelling his story, and he was involved with it and all that sort of stuff. So it's very, very legitimately retold. And they also had another one which is called Grow, which is a rather wonderful story. It's very, very funny. They write comedy with a serious message behind it very well. But this show was about a pair of Amish sisters who go on their Rumspringa, which is where they leave their Amish community and they go out into the world to experience it for a year before deciding whether to return to the Amish community and go back to Amish ways, and they've tasted the real world and decided not to go there, or whether to enter the real world and stay there.
That's a very fair way of doing things, isn't it?
Yeah, yes. I think it's a very solid approach. And while they're there, they get it. One of them is very green fingered. Very, very excellent with all plants.
I see where the word grow is coming from.
Yes.
At least in one meaning. Go on.
Yes, you're about to find the other one, which is that they, unintentionally not knowing really how the real world works, she gets involved with a grow-up and starts growing the best marijuana plants.
Oh, you see, I'm an idiot. I've been in the world all my life, and I didn't actually recognise that term.
Fair enough.
So
yes,
they're diverted into the wrong kind of market gardening.
Yes, but she finds enjoyment in the success of being able to do something well. But it's absolutely delightful because, of course, they're in with a couple of reprobates who are going to take them for all they're worth. But the story that develops out of it is absolutely charming. And both of those shows, like Colleen and Akiva, I don't know to what extent their work is known outside of Canada, but look into their stuff. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Well, both of those shows sound like they've got really interesting, intriguing plots.
They do.
I'm sitting here smiling because both of them they delight me with that sounds like a clever basis for something interesting. Yeah,
and they work with excellent book writers as well, and so they get this very solid dialogue that supports their writing, and it's absolutely marvelous. Colleen, you can actually see Colleen if you don't know their work. You can see Colleen a lot on Twitch. She's become a musical Twitch streamer, and so I think 2 or 3 times a week she'll do sort of 5 or 6 hour streams just playing requests and things like that.
She's a live performer in that sense.
But is also part of this phenomenal writing duo. So yeah, if you get a chance to check out their stuff, Colleen and Akiva is Akiva to those that don't know the name. Absolutely wonderful stuff, and
that's how they're known.
That's how they're known.
So it's Colleen and Akiva is their Gilbert Sullivan moniker.
Correct. Yes. And I would be very surprised. As I say, I'm not personally familiar with how well known they are outside of Canada, but I'll be very surprised if that doesn't boom in the very near future.
But these are your tip for the top. That we should start keeping our ear open because they're likely to emerge.
Honestly, I think so. And their work is so strong.
There's a much greater focus now on Canada as a creative powerhouse, certainly in musical theatre. I think doors have opened.
Yeah.
And Come From Away, once again, it can't all be down to one show, and it isn't down to one show, but that is a flower of a cultural community. Mm-hmm. And where there is success breeds success.
Yeah. One of the things I've started learning a lot since I moved over there, every now and then somebody comes up in conversation, and my friends now know this is almost like a running joke with several of them, and they're like, that person's Canadian, right? And it blows my mind because there's so many well-known Canadians who I think for a long time, to become famous, to become well-known, you wanted to be American. Because
is that less so now, would you say?
Distinctly.
Yes.
But it was, for a while, if you were Canadian, nobody knew who you were.
Yes,
if you were American, everybody knew who you were. And so I'm discovering all these people now who I never realised were Canadian. And there's always been a lot of great Canadian content. But I think with the increasing presence in all fields, like, I don't know why this is the first example that sprang to mind, but Emilio, who of course plays Shang-Chi in Marvel and has had a variety of other roles since and before, known for Kim's Convenience, which was a show. I don't know how familiar that is over here.
Not at all.
No, okay.
Well, I say not at all with me. It might be terribly, I may not be the bellwether for all popular culture in Britain, it turns out.
But it followed the track that Fleabag followed over here. It played the Toronto Fringe, it got incredibly successful, and it became a television series. Very good for those who are interested in checking it out. But he started, I think that was his breakout, and he's now blown up to be this international celebrity. I think the same thing is happening more and more with Canadian music. It's being recognised as being Canadian. And I think musical theatre is hot on the heels. And I think that, keep an eye out on those two. They will be a part of that movement for sure, if they're not already.
I look forward to them coming to London, as we call it over here. So we didn't name it twice.
They have been, very briefly. They had a run, and I can't remember what it may have been of that. I forget now. I can't remember which show it was, at the Other Palace.
Oh, Victoria.
But only for a hot second.
Yeah.
I think they were here for a week or something like that. I don't remember exactly.
That's how the Palace more or less works, actually.
Right. But so they were here very briefly, but I would be very surprised if they're not here in the future. If it's not them, then somebody doing their work.
Oh, I look forward to that, because they sound like a couple of creatives who are worth keeping tabs on.
I personally believe so.
I shall follow your tip, David.
And then the last show I want to mention isn't really a musical per se, but it had some wonderful music in it, and I just want an excuse to talk about it, really. Which was a show I just saw at the Toronto Fringe, and I think it's going to start being licensed out more now, rather than, up to this point, it has always been the creator who performed it. It's a gentleman by the name of Adam Prue, who has a show called Emilio's A Million Chameleons.
Oh, what a fabulous name.
Right.
Yes.
And it tells the story of the son of the man who formed the Chameleon Circus, essentially. And he's dressed as a ringmaster.
What is the Chameleon Circus?
It's a circus made up almost exclusively of chameleons. It's all these performing...
Actual animals?
Chameleons, yes.
Which is a nice circular beginning to circular thing for the conversation.
That's true, actually.
Anthropomorphism or otherwise.
I didn't realise that, but you're correct.
I didn't know there was a chameleon circus.
There isn't.
Oh, fine.
No, this is entirely fictional.
Fine. Oh, fine. In which case, the animal rights issues don't come up.
No, correct. But it's a puppetry show. And Adam is an extremely talented puppeteer. He does a lot of work around North America, and one of the reasons I mention him is he is looking into coming over and doing a show at the Edinburgh Fringe. He was here last year to kind of suss out what the Fringe looks like, and he's going to be coming here, I think. Maybe next year, not sure, 100%, but he will be here. And his work is absolutely marvellous. But there's just some really, really good musical numbers in this one, including the title song, Emilio's A Million Chameleons, which, once you've heard it, is in your head for at least a day.
It also has a sense of a patter song about it, doesn't it? Because the title suggests that.
It's got a little bit of that
Yeah.
vibe. It's not a full-on patter song, but it's certainly... Yes,
yeah.
exactly. It's certainly got that element to it, and it's, I think, it's absolutely delightful. It's funny, it's got a little bit of poignancy to it as well, and the way that he tells the story on stage is marvellous, and it could, it's got a lot of kid leaning in terms of how it's told, but it works beautifully for an adult audience as well.
Family friendly is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I saw the 10 o'clock show at the Toronto Fringe, so he slipped in a couple of gags that wouldn't normally be there. Yeah. And it's just one of those things that was absolutely brilliant. He's an excellent... I'd never heard him sing. I'd seen him do some stuff. I saw he's got another show called... oh my goodness. Family Crow, which is a murder mystery, but it's all crows.
And puppets.
And, with other puppets, yeah. But this one, it's got such a light touch to it, and it's very, very funny. As I say, I think he's doing one or two more performances of it and then starting to license it out. So, but keep an eye on Adam Prue. It's Prue spelled Proulx.
That kind of Prue.
That kind of Prue. But keep an eye out on him coming. I hope I can say this on radio. He works for the Pucking Fuppet Company.
You can say it, but you have to say it slowly.
Yes. I had to think about that for a second. And yeah, if he brings something over to Edinburgh, that's a recommendation for the future, because his stuff is marvellous, and I think you will get a kick out of it.
And there are musical style songs in it.
Yeah, so Family Crow didn't have any. This one does. Yeah. And it's...
that's what I want to hear.
Yeah. But we'll see what he comes over with. But I recommend him in general. And if he happens to bring something with songs over, great.
David, it's been marvellous talking to you. It's also marvellous to hear what I'm going to describe as a shopping list for the future, at least for me.
There have been a few, though, haven't there?
Yes, quite. No, but it's lovely to hear your experience, because, as I say, musical theatre is now only one significant part of your life, not,
Yes.
but you've got so many others now, personally and professionally, and you're a man of many talents, and those talents are now being used up in lots of directions. So the 360 degree of your view is interesting. But thank you so much for talking to me today. It's also just lovely to see you again, old chap.
Likewise.
But yeah, let's do this again next time you're over here.
Sounds good to me.
Musical talk. Well, there we are. That was David Kingsmill, and it was my great pleasure to have the opportunity to catch up with him again at last year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe. I do hope I'll be seeing him again in the future, and if I do, I hope there'll be another chance to have a further conversation. And as I said at the beginning of the programme, Canadian musical theatre has really put itself on the map. We've come from away only a few years ago, and it has really expanded into a very exciting powerhouse and creative hub. And I hope will help remind the world of the importance of Canada as a great, independent, creative nation, which we all know it to be. Well, most of us. And that's it for this week. I do hope you've enjoyed this edition. Do join us again next time, or whenever, for another edition of Musical Talk, where we'll be looking at something else in the ever-expanding world of musical theatre. So for the time being, there's just an opportunity for me to say, this has been Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits. Pip pip. This episode of Musical Talk, presented by Thos Ribbits and David Kingsmill, and edited by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2026. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk or subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favourite podcasts. And follow us on all the usual social media networks.
It is one of the two big non-Toronto. Let's let him get out of the way.
There's more to come. I just carry on.
Yeah, fair enough. Place names in Canada are, as it is true in the USA as well. Oops.